Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. Now's the time to be planting and putting out enriched strips for fall wheat. And joining us now is Brian Arnell, our Precision Nutrient Management Specialist, to give us a little bit of advice. And Brian, let's start with the what and the why of enriched strips in the first place.
All right, so I'll start with the why. You know, we've been working on enriched strips at OSU since the late 90s, early 2000s, doing research in all crops, but primarily wheat. So we have a long history in winter wheat and understand how it works. Year in and year out, the enriched strip is making Oklahoma wheat producers $10 per acre. That's either in savings of nitrogen, where they are reducing their rate and making just as good yields, or in increased yields where they're putting on a little bit more nitrogen in the environments that need it and they make more grain. So year in, year out, we could almost always bank on a $10 per acre savings with enriched strips. Now in the enriched strips, how we do it is many mechanisms to put out. An enriched strip is nothing more than a higher rate of nitrogen in your field. So if the entire field is getting a pre-plant of 30 or 40 pounds of nitrogen, or if it's only starter with the drill, we need to go over the top of that field in a strip or two with another 30 to 50 pounds of nitrogen for winter wheat. If this were dual purpose wheat a little bit earlier in the season, I'd be recommending a little bit more for the enriched strip. We can put the enriched strips out in a variety of ways. From large self-propelled sprayers, producers will run just a center section of the boom, putting out a liquid spray with that center section going across the field. I'd like to see at least 300 feet long, but there's many producers that will do the full field length just to see that entire field. There are some that are using anhydrous applicators pre-plant, and they just do a double pass to get 2 passes on, so they double up a rate. Many producers are buying urea and renting a spinner spreader and just pulling that across their fields. That's a very effective way to cover a lot of acres pretty quickly. I know several producers that can do all their acres in a single afternoon with that. More commonly, we're getting crop consultants and CCAs that are putting out enriched strips and applicators like this, either ATV or UTV with a 20-25 gallon liquid tank and a 10-foot sprayer on the back. That allows you to cover a significant amount of ground in a very short period of time.
Is it best to do your enriched strip before or after you plant?
It's best to put it out.
Okay.
I'm happy with any timing that you can put it out. My common recommendation is pre-plant, and up to 30 days after planting is a good window for winter wheat.
And then what about weather factors, rain, and other environmental things that are beyond our control?
That's where the enriched strip really comes into play. The enriched strip helps us measure the soil and plant at the same time. It's that piece of litmus paper that we put out there. So if we have excessive rains and the system loses nitrogen because of leaching or denitrification, the enriched strip will show that because it has more than the rest of the field, and it'll start showing up. If we have perfect conditions for release of nitrogen from the system, it won't show up because it says, you know what, there's enough nitrogen out here, I don't need any more. And the moment you start seeing those enriched strips in the field is the moment we need to start planting for that top dress fertilizer, whether it's November or March.
And speaking of fertilizer, what kind of decisions should we be making and things should we be doing now that it's planting time?
Now that it's planting time, you know, most of the producers out there, if they haven't gotten out their pre-plant, they're probably already made those decisions and bought that fertilizer. So the real primary decision right now is that starter fertilizer. The majority of the Southern Great Plains will put fertilizer with seed through the drill, the air seed, or however you're applying it. And so there's just a few things that we always need to keep in mind. One, that little seed and that little seedling is extremely sensitive to both salts and ammonia. And the salts are important because our fertilizers, such as 1846-0, 1152, the nitrogen in those fertilizers are a salt type nitrogen. And so is the potassium and sulfur in many of our fertilizers. So there's a limit to the amount of salts we can put in row with seed. With wheat, that runs between 20 and 30 pounds of salt, depending on soil moisture and soil texture. A moist, fine soil can handle a significant amount more salt, closer to that 30-pound range, than a dry sand. You have to be much more cautious on that. But it's about that 20-pound range, which would get you about 100 pounds of 1846-0 is a safe rate. Now, many producers do something that we don't recommend at OSU, but it's a very common practice. That's putting urea with the seed. But what happens with that urea is the first process of urea going into a plant available form is it dissolves and turns into ammonia. And from ammonia, then it goes to ammonium. So that little seedling is in the presence of ammonia when it has urea prill next to it. It'd be no different than putting on anhydrous ammonia the same day that you plant. That's usually something we try to caution against because there's a higher risk of damage.
A lot of information to sort through. For people who would like to learn more, they can always go as close as their county extension office or find more on the SUNUP website. Brian, thank you. Let's go ahead and get rolling with this enriched strip.
Wheat's starting to sprout out of the ground across Oklahoma, and Kim, the price of wheat has actually kind of been sprouting a little bit too.
Yeah, we picked up about 20 cents last week. We lost a little bit of that on Thursday. You look at that KC December contract price, it's hammered up against that $5 resistance point. That's like hammering up against a concrete wall. One day it actually traded above $5, and closed at 5.01. If we can break that $5 resistance level with that December contract, I think we could pick up another 20 or 30 cents. Right now, that does not look very likely.
We always hear you talk about the resistance prices. How do you determine a resistance price?
We just look at price patterns. The market, the people in the market tend to be creatures of habit. You look at past trades and look at past bottoms and past tops on the charts, and they'll show you where these support and resistance points are. There's no rhyme or reason why they work. It's just that I think that the market is like a human being because it has a personality, and it's the traders in it, and they tend to react to certain price levels.
If we do break that resistance, where do you see the price going?
Well, you look at that December contract, if it breaks 5, I could see it getting up to probably challenge that $5.30. It's got some light resistance at 5.20, some additional, probably stronger resistance at 5.30. It's broken the short run downtrend. We've got a sideways pattern going on right now. We've got a long run downtrend in process that was established in August of 2012. We've got to get probably above about $5.80, maybe $6 to break that long run downtrend. So right now, prices are still on a downtrend.
So say we meet that 5.30, do producers ditch the third, and a third and sell everything?
I would stay with stagnant in the market. I think I'd have probably sold a part of, if I've sold a third, I've got a third to sell over the next 6 weeks. I'd have probably sold a third of that third or 20% of that third on this 20-cent price rally. I think I'd take advantage of every price rally. We've got prices up, say cash price at $4.50 on this peak. I'd have tried to get some of that. If I picked up another 20, 30 cents, I'd probably pick up some more of that. Every time I got a 15, 20, 30 cent price increase, I'd take some of it.
Okay, let's change gears a little bit. Corn is being harvested, and same thing with sorghum across Oklahoma. Let's look at the prices.
Well, just like wheat, we've had a little rally in corn prices. They're talking another couple weeks to get far enough in the corn and sorghum harvest so that that harvest pressure will back off, and then maybe we can get some price rallies out of it. I think the bottom has been established. The odds of it coming in significantly higher than we expect right now, I think they're relatively low, and we may get another little small rally as we get out 4 or 5 or 6 weeks. With just like wheat, we've got excess supply of corn, and there's not much room for prices to go up.
Are countries buying our excesses?
Well, we've got excesses around the world, especially wheat. World wheat production is the third record in a row, 26.9 billion bushels. Out of the last 3 years, we've essentially had 3 records. Last year wasn't a record, but it nearly matched the record. So you've got high ending stocks, high production. So there's just a lot of wheat around the world. The competition is very stiff.
Okay, record-setting Kim Anderson, grain marketing specialist. We do appreciate it, and we'll see him again next week.
Hi, I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet Weather Report. Farmers are watching the weather as they wait to harvest their summer crops. Late planted summer crops need warm fall weather to fully mature. Our heat units have been good this September. An example is a graph from Guthrie that shows air temperatures, the purple line, compared to the long-term 15-year average, the green fill. Guthrie's September air temperatures so far have been 3 to 4 degrees above average. Those warmer than average air temperatures were reflected in the maximum air temperatures Tuesday afternoon. The far southwest corner of Oklahoma had highs of 96 and 95. Wednesday was cooler. Bernieville was the warmest site at 92 degrees. Looking back over the summer at the number of days when it hit 100 or more, Tipton took the trophy with 28 days. Other hot spots in 2015 were Hooker in the Panhandle, Buffalo and Freedom in the Northwest, and in the Southwest, Hollis, Hobart, Altus, and Granfield. On the cooler side, 23 out of 119 Mesonet sites never recorded a 100-degree temperature this summer. This year's number of days at or above 100 degrees pales compared to the count from 2011. That year of intense drought, Granfield had 101 100 or hotter days, and the lowest count was 15 days at Kenton. Everybody burned in 2011. Between September 18th and the 23rd, locations in central Oklahoma received some good rainfall amounts. Oilton near Tulsa had 4 and 22/100 inches. Kingfisher, Chickasha, Apache, Byers, and Ada all had 2+ inches of rain. This rainfall contributed to good jumps in soil moisture in the areas colored green on a map of the change in soil moisture at 10 inches. Kingfisher was one of 3 locations that jumped 9/10 in fractional water index. This index goes from 0, dry, to 1, wet. Kingfisher joins El Reno and other high soil moisture locations in the green map areas on a map of the plant available water from the surface down to 16 inches as of Tuesday, September 22nd. The areas colored brown and yellow are drier areas. The long-range outlooks are indicating more rain as we move into October and the winter months. There's definitely areas in Oklahoma that need that rain now. Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
Producers need to be thinking about some weed treatments right now. And Angela, what should they be looking for in their field?
So right now we're seeing a lot of our winter annual weeds just starting to emerge, particularly if you've already went through at the first tillage pass. And we're seeing people going out planting their canola. We're right in the middle of canola planting time, just getting started with wheat. I think the report latest was about 6% planted in Oklahoma. So we want to be thinking about those burn down and pre-applications in wheat and ahead of those crops.
What does the weed crop look like so far in Oklahoma?
So far we've had really great moisture this fall, so we're seeing a nice flush of weeds, especially for those of you who haven't been out with a tillage pass yet. And so it's important to go out there and get those weeds controlled before you get the crop in the ground. Here
at the agronomy farm, you have some studies going on here. We have post and then pre-emergent trials going on?
Yeah, so we have some plots here where we're looking at herbicide symptomology, and this is herbicides that are labeled in many different crops in Oklahoma. So we've planted a group of crops and a group of weeds, and we're looking at what these herbicides do to each one of those crops and how they're selective against weeds as well. Plot number 9 here is atrazine. This is a very commonly used herbicide in corn and also in sorghum. And this is a product that's going to really only leave, as far as weeds, it'll only leave grasses. The plot will be nice and clean, and really you can only see in this plot that corn is still in place. The wheat that we have planted here is very sensitive, and wheat is sensitive to atrazine carryover. So want to be careful about that if you have had corn over the summer and then you want to go to wheat, or if you had sorghum and you want to go to wheat. You can see that it's essentially going to die here.
But the weeds that you planted just haven't matured enough to to be affected by those? Or,
no, in this
or
case,
did that...
the weeds breach the surface and die. So
Okay.
this will be a very clean plot. And essentially, when we put atrazine out, it's bare ground except for corn and Johnson grass.
Wow.
So very good grass control product, broadleaf control product for corn. And then plot 7 is our bleacher plot. So if you take a look particularly at canola leaves, this is Command is the product that we've put out here, and we can see there's still some remnants of the bleacher where all the cotyledons have turned white. Right. You can also see it very nicely on the corn, though the corn has some insect injury as well. About 7 days ago, these plants were all completely white.
Wow.
Yeah, just so no chlorophyll whatsoever, but once it gets down through that herbicide layer, it starts to green up again. And actually canola is not very sensitive to this, so while it'll be a little bit stunted, this canola will come up and be just fine, but it's nice to see the symptomology there.
What are you finding so far?
So far we've got our pre-emergent symptomology out. You might see some little missing sections in some of the rows down there, and those we're going to be seeing a lot of below ground symptomology. You can't really see it above ground except for where there are missing plants. But soon we're going to have the post-emergent treatments out, and we'll see a lot more chlorosis and some stunting and things that are really neat to look at with herbicides.
Let's talk about broadleafs right now. Folks maybe want to come back with canola. Is there anything that they need to be doing or should have been doing leading up to canola?
So coming up to canola, and there's still some time to get burn down applications and get canola planted, we want to make sure that we don't mix 2,4-D, dicamba, MCP, those types of products in with our tank mixes ahead of canola, because those are going to have some issues at this point. You don't have enough time between the end of the planting window to get those products out. So for canola, we want to right now just stick to glyphosate as our main burn down, or a paraquat application, or even just primary tillage as our burn down for canola.
Now going forward, the post, and this will be later on in November, what are some of the things that producers need to be thinking about for that?
So you'll want to watch for a flush as we move through the winter season. Right now we can use pre-emergent herbicides in our wheat. Those can go down at the time of planting. And then, for example, Zidua, which is a new product we have in wheat, it's hard to come by right now, so if you haven't gotten your hands on any, you might have to do some digging to get some. That one goes down at a spike application, so just after the wheat emerges. It's a little bit different timing. Later in the season, we'll be looking towards those sulfonylurea or group 2 herbicides, and those will be going down as we get a little bit deeper into the winter season.
Okay, speaking of the plots here at the agronomy farm, you're going to have a teaching opportunity for producers across Oklahoma coming up here in a couple weeks.
Right, in a couple of weeks we're going to be hosting a herbicide symptomology clinic. It's been a while since we've had one here at OSU, and we're going to have it right here at the Stillwater Agronomy Farm on October the 7th. We're going to start serving donuts and coffee at 8:30, and at 9 o'clock we'll get right into learning about symptomology on these different crops. Also, we'll have some drift simulation going on here in wheat and canola, and we'll also hope to have a spray table here so that we can look at some nozzle tip selection for producers. This is for producers, ag educators, crop consultants, anyone who has an interest in what those herbicides look like. And we want to remember, please RSVP to me here at OSU. The number is 405-744-9588.
Okay, and also you have some information on your website, which we'll put a link to at sunup.okstate.edu.
Livestock markets have been on the defensive the past few weeks, and joining us now to talk about it is Daryl Peel, our livestock marketing specialist. And Daryl, to use a term from my favorite brother, why are the livestock markets on struggle street lately?
You know, there's a lot of things going on, really big picture stuff. There's been a lot of concern about global market conditions. China in particular has been the source of a lot of uncertainty, and it's really the uncertainty that's causing the problems right now. You know, we talk about markets being driven by greed greed, fear, and ego, and at various times one of those emotions is more important than the other, and really it's been about fear for the last month or so in many markets, and that fear, you know, kind of has to run its course. It's based on the uncertainty. We don't know what the reality is in some cases, and so we're probably overreacting in some ways, but it takes some time for that to sort itself out, and then we'll get back to a little more fundamental based picture of the markets.
Is some of this based then on what we've been seeing in the stock market too, sort of parallel?
When you look at the impacts of those global market factors in particular, one of the places they come home in the U.S. economy then is in the stock market, and that uncertainty, the volatility we've seen there. And the stock markets and the action that takes place there is tied very strongly to our commodity futures markets. And so, you know, it sets off a chain of events when you have that kind of volatility, and that's what we've been seeing there. And it's even gotten down then from the futures markets into the cash markets, because again, it affects psychology. It's that emotional part of the market that may not make a lot of sense, or it may not be real rational, but it is what it is, and it takes some time for that to all sort itself out.
There's definitely effects. In terms of beef, what are you seeing with cattle on feed then?
You know, in addition to all of those big picture factors, we've got some other issues right now. You know, we've had cattle on feed inventories above a year ago for many months now, most of this year, and yet we're not placing more cattle in the feedlot. We're just keeping them there longer. Feedlots are reacting to some very difficult and challenging margin situations. That is to say, they've lost money most of the year, and so their reaction to that has been to keep these cattle longer. That keeps inventories higher, but the net effect is now we've got some very large cattle. We've got a growing inventory of extremely heavy cattle, and those are beginning to actually weigh on the market and creating a new set of challenges for us here, I think, in the fall of the year to move past those excessively heavy cattle.
You mentioned fall, of course. We turn the corner this week to a new season. What kind of things can producers keep in mind, and what do you expect in the months ahead?
Well, you know, in the fall, we got, you know, in Oklahoma, we've got a couple things going on. It looks like we're going to have some decent wheat pasture grazing conditions developing this fall, so stocker producers are going to be looking to buy stocker cattle. This weakness we've had recently in the markets may provide a buying opportunity. I think producers should consider that in terms of the timing of when they might want to get in. I don't know that it'll last, because on the other hand, once that wheat pasture demand kicks in, I think we'll actually see some recovery in these cash prices, and that's probably what's important for the cow-calf producers, is to maybe not panic too much about what's happening right now. I don't know that we'll fully recover what we've lost in the last month or so, but certainly I expect to see some recovery as this thing stabilizes and as we see the stocker cattle demand and even some new feedlot demand kick in this fall for feeder cattle.
Okay, Daryl Peel, thanks a lot. We'll see you again soon.
Those cow-calf operations with fall calving herds will be going into a breeding season in about a couple of months from now. So this is a good time to assess the bull battery to make sure that they're ready to do the job for which we've purchased them. First of all, I'd suggest that you make an appointment with your local large animal veterinarian to have all the bulls go through a breeding soundness exam. And at that time, as the bulls are visiting that veterinarian, that's a good time for you to ask about whether your bulls need to have a trichomoniasis test. Trichomoniasis is a reproductive disease of cattle that is spread by bulls, and therefore it's important that you identify if any bulls are in your particular bull battery that are carriers, so that they're not going into the breeding season and spreading it throughout the cow herd. And that's also a good reason why, if you purchase bulls, you want to purchase virgin bulls, those that have never been exposed to cows before. Now, if one or more of your bulls do not pass that breeding soundness exam, then I'd suggest that we want to get a hold of a purebred producer in our area, go to one of the production sales as soon as possible and purchase the replacement bull, so that we can have some time to get him home and used to his new environment. You see, I would visit with the purebred producer that raised the bull, find out what the diet was of that young bull before you purchased him. And in that way, then we can make changes gradually over the next couple of months. If the bull has been consuming a high energy diet, then we can gradually reduce the amount of grain in his diet, increase the amount of forage, so that when he goes into the breeding season, his rumen is used to going ahead and digesting a high forage diet rather than a partial grain diet. One of the mistakes that I see producers do is to take a bull that's been fed a high energy diet and just overnight put him out into a breeding pasture with no grain, nothing but forage, and therefore his energy intake has changed dramatically in a short period of time. We know from some research that that could reduce the bull fertility and therefore the calf crop. If you're going to put together groups of bulls in the breeding pasture together, then I would really recommend that those bulls be pinned together for the next couple of months before the breeding season. They're going to establish the social order of those bulls. They're going to figure out who's king of the mountain. Let's get the fighting over with before the start of the breeding season, so that those bulls are more interested in breeding cows than fighting each other. Bulls are a considerable investment for any cow-calf operation. Certainly just a few common sense management practices before the breeding season can help us get the most out of that investment and therefore the best calf crop possible next year. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Thanks so much for joining us for SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout, and we'll see you next time. Remember, Oklahoma Ag starts at SUNUP.